Chapter 6, Into the Forest. "I wish the McCready would hurry up and take all those people away," said Susan presently. "I'm getting horribly cramped." "And what a filthy smell of camphor," said Edmund. "I expect the pockets of these coats are full of it," said Susan, "to keep away the moths." "There's something sticking in my back," said Peter. "And isn't it cold?" said Susan. "Now that you mention it, it is cold," said Peter. "Hang it all, it's wet too. What's the matter with this place? I'm sitting on something wet. It's getting wetter every minute." He struggled to his feet. "Let's get out," said Edmund. "They're gone." Oh, said Susan suddenly, and everyone asked her what was the matter. "I'm sitting against a tree," said Susan. "And look, it's getting light. Over there." "By Jove, you're right," said Peter. "And look there, and there! It's trees all around, and this wet stuff is snow. Why, I do believe we've gotten into Lucy's wood after all." And now there was no mistaking it, and all four children stood blinking in the daylight of a winter day. Behind them were coats hanging on pegs. In front of them were snow-covered trees. Peter turned at once to Lucy. "I apologize for not believing you," he said. "I'm sorry. Will you shake hands?" "Of course," said Lucy, and did. "And now," said Susan, "what do we do next?" "Do?" said Peter. "Why, go and explore the wood, of course." "Ugh," said Susan, stamping her feet. "It's pretty cold. What about putting on some of these coats?" "Well, they're not ours," said Peter doubtfully. "I'm sure nobody would mind," said Susan. "It isn't as if we've wanted to take them out of the house. We shan't even take them out of the wardrobe." "I never thought of that, Sue," said Peter. "Of course, now that you put it that way, I see. No one could say you had bagged a coat as long as you leave it in the wardrobe where you found it. And I suppose this whole country is in the wardrobe." They immediately carried out Susan's very sensible plan. The coats were rather too big for them, so that they came down to their heels and looked more like royal robes than coats when they put them on. But they all felt a good deal warmer, and each thought the others looked better in their new get-ups and more suitable to the landscape. "We can pretend we're Arctic explorers," said Lucy. "This is going to be exciting enough without pretending," said Peter, and he began leading the way into the forest. There were heavy darkish clouds overhead, and it looked as though there might be snow before night. "I say," said Edmund presently, ought to be bearing a little bit more to the left? That is, if we're aiming for the lamppost?" He had forgotten for the moment that he must pretend never to have been in the wood before. The moment the words were out of his mouth, he realized he had given himself away. Everyone stopped. Everyone stared at him. Peter whistled. "Whew. So, you really were here," he said. "That time Lou said she'd met you in here and you made it out that she was telling lies?" There was a long, dead silence. "Well, of all the poisonous little beasts," said Peter. But then he shrugged his shoulders, and he said no more. There seemed indeed no more to say, and presently the four resumed their journey. But Edmund was saying to himself, "I'll pay you all out of all of this, you pack of stuck-up, self-satisfied prigs." "Where are we going anyway?" said Susan, chiefly for the sake of changing the subject. "I think Lou ought to be the leader," said Peter. "Goodness knows she deserves it." "Where will you take us, Lou?" "What about going to see Mr. Tumnus?" said Lucy. "He's the nice fawn I told you about." Everyone agreed to this, and off they went, walking briskly and stamping their feet. Lucy proved to be a good leader. At first she wondered whether she would be able to find the way, but she recognized an odd-looking tree for one place and a stump in another, and brought them on to where the ground became uneven, and into the little valley, and at last to the very door of Mr. Tumnus's cave. But there a terrible surprise awaited them. The door had been wrenched off its hinges and broken into bits. Inside, the cave was dark and cold, and had the damp feel and smell of a place that had not been lived in for several days. Snow had drifted in from the doorway, and it was heaped on the floor, mixed with something black, which turned out to be the charred sticks and ashes from the fire. Someone had apparently flung it about the room and then stamped it out. The crockery lay smashed on the floor. The picture of the fawn's father had been slashed into shreds with a knife. "This is a pretty good washout," said Edmund. "Not much good coming here." "What is this?" said Peter, stooping down. He had just noticed a piece of paper which had been nailed through the carpet to the floor. "Is there anything written on it?" asked Susan. "Yes, I think there is," answered Peter, "but I can't see it in this light. Let's go out into the open air." And they all went out into the daylight, and in the crowded room, they crowded around Peter as he read out the following words. "The former occupant of these premises, the Fawn Tumnus, is under arrest and awaiting his trial on charges of high treason against Her Imperial Majesty Jadis, Queen of Narnia, Chatelaine of Cair Paravel, Empress of the Lone Islands, etc., etc., also of comforting her said Majesty's enemies, harboring spies, and fraternizing with humans. Signed, Malgrim, Captain of the Secret Police. Long live the Queen." The children stared at each other. "I don't know that I'm going to like this place after all," said Susan. "Who is this queen, Lou?" said Peter. "Do you know anything about her?" "She isn't a real queen at all," answered Lucy. "She's a horrible witch. The White Witch. Everyone, all the wood people hate her. She's made an enchantment over the whole country so that it's always winter here and never Christmas." I wonder if there's any point in going on," said Susan. "I mean, it doesn't seem particularly safe here, and it looks as if it won't be much fun either. It's getting colder every minute and we've brought nothing to eat. What about just going home?" "Oh, but we can't, said Lucy suddenly. "Don't you see? We can't just go home. Not after this. It's all on my account that the poor fawn has gotten into this trouble. He hid me from the witch and showed me the way back. That's what it means by comforting the Queen's enemies and fraternizing with the humans. We simply must try to rescue him." "A lot we could do," said Edmund. "We haven't even got anything to eat." "Shut up, you," said Peter, who was still very angry with Edmund. "What do you think, Susan?" "I've a horrid feeling that Lula is right," said Susan. "I don't want to go a step further, and I wish we'd never come. But I think we must try to do something for Mr. whatever his name is. I mean the fawn." "That's what I feel too," said Peter. "I'm worried about having no food with us. I'd vote for going back and getting something from the larder, only there doesn't seem to be any certainty of getting into this country again once you're out of it. I think we'll have to go on." "So do I," said both the girls. "If only we knew where that poor chap was in prison," said Peter. They were all still wondering what to do next when Lucy said, "Look, there's a robin. Such a red breast. That's the first bird I've seen here. I say, I wonder if birds can talk in Narnia. It almost looks as if he wanted to say something to us." Then she turned to the robin and said, "Please, can you tell us where Tumnus the fawn has been taken to?" And as she said this, she took a step towards the bird. It at once flew away, but only as far as the next tree. There it perched and looked at them very hard, as if it understood all they had been saying. Almost without noticing they had done so, the four children went a step or two nearer to it. At this, the robin flew away again to the next tree, and once more looked at them very hard. You couldn't have found a robin with a redder chest or a brighter eye. "Do you know," said Lucy, "I really believe he means us to follow him." "I have an idea he does," said Susan. "What do you think, Peter?" "Well, we might as well try it," answered Peter. The robin appeared to understand the matter thoroughly. It kept going from tree to tree, always a few yards ahead of them, but always so near they could easily follow it. In this way it led them slightly downhill. Wherever the robin alighted, a little shower of snow would fall off the branch. Presently the clouds parted overhead, the winter sun came out, and the snow all around them grew dazzlingly bright. They'd been traveling in this way for about half an hour, with the two girls in front, when Edmund said to Peter, "If you're not still too high and mighty to talk to me, I've something to say which you better listen to." "What is it?" asked Peter. "Hush! Not so loud," said Edmund. "There's no good frightening the girls. But have you realized what we're doing?" "What?" said Peter, lowering his voice to whisper. "We're following a guide we know nothing about. How do we know which side that bird is on? Why should it be leading us into a trap? That's a nasty idea. Still, a robin, they're good birds in all the stories I've ever read. I'm sure a robin wouldn't be on the wrong side. Well, if it comes to that, which is the right side? How do we know the fawn is on the right side and the queen, yes, I know we've been told she's a witch, is in the wrong? We don't really know anything about either. The fawn saved Lucy. He said he did, but how do we know? And there's another thing too. Has anyone the least idea of the way home from here? Great Scott, said Peter. I hadn't thought about that. And no chance for dinner now either, said Edmund. And that's the end of chapter 6. It can be funny to see the lengths that we will go to convince ourselves of something that we want to be convinced of. Edmund wants to go be with the White Witch. He wants the Turkish delight. He wants to be a king. He wants to be superior and proven right and to put the rest of his family in their place. So it's easy for him, maybe, to point holes in what everyone else is seeing. To say, well, how do we know whose side the fawn is on? How do we know that the bird is trustworthy? How do we know that the stories we're told about the queen aren't actually the ones that are the lies? And he can tell. And he knows at some deep level, whether it was the way that he felt when he first met the queen, whether it's the way that the fawn's house has been ransacked and destroyed. Those are not the actions of the good guys. And Edmund knows that. But he can feel himself being pulled. He feels himself pulling. And sometimes when we know it's the wrong thing to do, but we want to do it anyway, we can come up with all sorts of excellent sounding reasons to make our choices exactly what we want them to be. So be careful. He actually makes a couple of good points here. They are getting lost. They are getting further away from how to get back to their own world, and they don't have dinner, and they're not exactly sure who is who or what is what. But at the same time, as much practical sense as he makes, don't forget, ultimately what he's doing is trying to justify himself. He even knows what he wants is wrong. But because he wants it, he's coming up with ways where he can feel better about it and maybe, just maybe, convince everyone else to listen too.